A Werewolf Shifter Romance, written by Amelia Hart. Chapter 1. Bread and Ashes. The throne room of Valdoria's capital castle stood empty, save for one man. Alderaan Greystone, alpha king of all shifter packs in the realm, sat motionless in the ornate chair his father had occupied before him. 8 years had passed since the old king's death. 8 years of rebuilding what tyranny had broken. Yet today, the weight of the crown felt heavier than ever. A letter lay on the armrest, its parchment creased from repeated readings. The words burned in Alderaan's mind even when he closed his eyes. Anonymous denunciations had reached him before, whispers of corruption within his own capital pack, but this one carried details too specific to dismiss. Omegas forced into servitude through impossible debts. Families torn apart when they could not pay fabricated taxes. Those who resisted simply disappeared. "My lord," Baylor's voice echoed through the vast chamber as the beta counselor entered, his boots clicking against stone. At 45, the man carried himself with the confidence of someone who had served 2 kings. His graying beard was neatly trimmed, his robes expensive. "You summoned me?" Alderaan held up the letter without speaking. He watched Baylor's expression carefully as the counselor took it, studied the words, then handed it back with a dismissive shake of his head. "More lies from malcontents who refuse to pay their fair share," Baylor said smoothly. "These denouncers seek to undermine the pack's stability with baseless accusations. I assure you, my lord, the taxes are reasonable, and the Omegas are treated with appropriate care." Appropriate care. Alderaan's voice was quiet, but his blue steel eyes never left Baylor's face. "Define that for me. They work. They receive food and shelter. They contribute to the pack's prosperity." Baylor spread his hands. What more could they ask? Everything, Alderaan thought. They could ask for everything we owe them as pack members. Dignity, safety, a future. But he only nodded slowly, folding the letter and tucking it into his tunic. "I see. Thank you for your counsel, Baylor. You may go." The beta bowed and departed, his footsteps fading into silence. Alderaan remained seated, his fingers drumming once against the throne's arm. 8 years of ruling had taught him many things, but perhaps the most valuable lesson was this. When a man protested too quickly, too smoothly, he was usually hiding something. It was time to see the truth for himself. The cabin on the outskirts of the pack territory was more hovel than home. Catherine knelt beside the stream that ran behind the structure, her hands red and raw as she scrubbed another nobleman's tunic against the rocks. The water was ice-cold even in late spring, numbing her fingers until she could barely feel the fabric slipping through them. "Cat?" Owen's voice came from the doorway, tentative and concerned. "You've been out here since before dawn. Come inside, please." She glanced over her shoulder at her younger brother. At 16, Owen should have already experienced his first shift, should have found his place within the pack hierarchy. Instead, he remained trapped in human form, a rare deformity that marked him as defective in the eyes of their community. The pack called him broken. They called Catherine a fool for refusing to abandon him. "I'm almost finished," she said, forcing warmth into her voice that she did not feel. "Go back inside before you catch cold." Owen hesitated, then retreated. Catherine returned to her scrubbing, muscles burning with the repetitive motion. The pile of laundry beside her seemed endless. This was her life now. Washing clothes for the castle nobles, receiving scraps of food in payment, watching her brother grow thinner each month, because there was never quite sufficient to fill both their bellies. It had not always been this way. 5 years ago, they had been a family. Mother, father, Owen, and Catherine. Their cabin had been small but warm, filled with laughter and the smell of her mother's cooking. Catherine's father had been a respected hunter, bringing meat to the pack and receiving fair compensation. They had not been wealthy, but they had been comfortable. Then the rogues came. The memory still woke Catherine in the dead of night, her heart pounding, her wolf clawing at the inside of her chest in remembered terror. The attack had been swift and brutal. Her parents had fought to protect their children, had died defending the cabin while Catherine pulled Owen into the hidden root cellar beneath the floorboards. They had huddled there for hours, listening to the sounds of battle, of death, of silence. When they finally emerged, both their parents were gone. She had been 19 then, Now, 5 years later at 24, she was still paying the price for that night. The pack buried them with minimal ceremony. No one offered to take in the orphaned siblings. At 19, Catherine had been expected to care for herself and her brother without assistance. Then came her first shift. Most wolves experienced their transformation around 13 or 14 years old. Catherine had been 21 when her wolf finally clawed its way to the surface, 3 years after her parents' deaths. The late manifestation marked her as weak, as defective as her brother. The pack that had once tolerated her now viewed her with contempt. Baylor, the beta counselor to the Alpha King, had been the one to deliver the news of her new status. He had stood in the doorway of this very cabin, his expression cold and businesslike. "Your family's debt to the pack has been calculated," he had said, consulting a ledger as though discussing grain stores rather than lives. "Your father's funeral, your mother's burial, the resources used to search for the rogues that attacked you. The total comes to 12 silver coins. You will pay 2 silver coins each month until the debt is satisfied. 2 silver coins. An impossible sum for a washerwoman who received only food scraps as payment. Catherine had tried to negotiate, had begged for more reasonable terms. Baylor had been unmoved. "If you cannot pay, you and your brother will be expelled from pack territory," he had said simply. "I'm sure the rogues beyond our borders would be happy to welcome you." The threat had been clear. Beyond pack protection, they would not survive a week. So Catherine had accepted additional work. During the day, she washed clothes in the stream. At night, she cleaned the castle stables, mucking out stalls and hauling hay until her back screamed and her hands bled. For this, she received 1 loaf of bread each week, 1 loaf to feed 2 people for 7 days. She divided it carefully, giving Owen the larger portions and telling him she had eaten at the castle. He believed her because he wanted to believe her, because the alternative was too painful to contemplate. Catherine wrung out the final tunic and added it to the basket. Her hands were shaking with exhaustion, but the sun was already climbing toward midday. If she hurried, she could deliver the laundry and begin her shift in the stables by evening. She carried the heavy basket back to the cabin, where Owen waited with a cup of weak tea made from yesterday's leaves. "You work too hard," he said softly. "Someone has to," Catherine replied, trying to make it sound gentle rather than bitter. She failed. Owen looked down at his hands, guilt written clearly across his young face. "If I could shift, if I could work." "Stop." Catherine set down the basket and gripped his shoulders, forcing him to meet her eyes. "This is not your fault. You are my brother and I will take care of you. That's what family does. But the pack can burn for all I care." The words came out sharper than she intended. Catherine took a breath, steadying herself. Anger was dangerous. Anger could lead to mistakes, and mistakes could cost them everything. "I need to deliver this laundry," she said, releasing Owen and lifting the basket again. "There's half a turnip in the cold box and a bit of cheese. That's yours for today. I'll bring bread tonight. Cat, you need to eat too. I'll eat at the castle." The lie came easily now, worn smooth by repetition. "I promise." She left before he could argue further, making her way along the narrow path that connected their isolated cabin to the pack's main settlement. Other wolves passed her without acknowledgement, their eyes sliding away as though she were invisible. The few who did notice her moved aside quickly, unwilling to be tainted by association. Catherine kept her head down and her steps quick. Invisibility was safer than attention. The castle loomed ahead, all gray stone and towering walls. She entered through the servant's gate, nodding to the guard who did not bother to nod back. The laundry mistress waited in the washing yard, her expression sour as always. "You're late," the older woman snapped, snatching the basket and rifling through its contents. "This work is barely acceptable. The collar on Lord Fenwick's shirt still has a stain." Catherine bit back a response. The stain had been set for weeks before she received the shirt, impossible to remove without damaging the fabric. But arguing would cost her the next batch of work. "I apologize," she said instead, lowering her eyes in submission. "I'll do better. See that you do." The laundry mistress tossed a small cloth bundle at Catherine's feet. "Here, your payment." Catherine knelt to retrieve it, finding 3 wrinkled turnips and a heel of stale bread, not even close to what they had agreed upon. But complaining was useless. She tucked the food into her apron and hurried away before the woman could reduce her payment further. The rest of the day passed in familiar misery. Catherine scrubbed floors in the castle kitchen, emptied chamber pots, hauled buckets of water from the well. She moved through the tasks mechanically, her mind distant, her body running on memory and desperation. As twilight fell, she made her way to the stables. "About time," the stable master grunted when she appeared. "The stalls won't clean themselves. Get to work." Catherine nodded and retrieved the shovel from its hook. The familiar smell of hay and horse surrounded her as she began the nightly routine. Muck out the stalls, haul the waste to the compost heap, spread fresh straw, fill water troughs, check each horse for injury or illness. Hours blurred together. Her shoulders ached. Her hands, already raw from washing, cracked and bled from gripping the shovel. But she continued, because this was how they survived. This was all she had. Near midnight, the stable master returned. He looked her up and down with obvious disdain, then tossed a small loaf of bread onto the ground near her feet. "Your payment," he said. "Try to show up on time tomorrow." Catherine picked up the bread, cradling it carefully. This would feed Owen for 3 days if she was careful. 4, if she could find wild greens to supplement their meals. "Thank you," she whispered. The stable master had already walked away. Catherine tucked the bread into her apron alongside the turnips and heel from the laundry mistress. Together, it was barely sufficient to keep one person alive, let alone 2. But it was what they had. She stepped out of the stables into the cool night air, exhaustion weighing on her like a physical burden. The walk back to the cabin seemed impossibly long. Her feet dragged with each step. Tomorrow, she would do this all again. And the day after that. And the day after that. Until either the debt was paid, or she collapsed from the effort. Catherine allowed herself one moment of weakness, standing alone in the darkness outside the stable walls. One moment to acknowledge the despair that lived in her chest like a stone, to feel the weight of her brother's dependence and the pack's contempt, and the impossible, grinding poverty that consumed every waking hour. Then she straightened her shoulders, adjusted the food in her apron, and began the long walk home. She did not notice the figure watching from the castle ramparts above, did not see the way his hands clenched on the stone wall as he observed her stumbling gait, did not hear the low growl that rumbled in his chest, barely audible even to his own ears. Alderaan Greystone, Alpha King, had seen all he needed to see. Tomorrow, he would return as someone else entirely. Chapter 2. The Beggar's Test. Dawn broke cold and gray over the capital Pax territory. Alderaan stood at the edge of the market square, his appearance transformed beyond recognition. Dirt smeared his face and tangled his black hair. His finest clothes had been replaced with tattered rags that hung loose on his frame, deliberately chosen to disguise his muscular build. Most importantly, he had suppressed his alpha aura completely, a feat that required constant concentration and left him feeling strangely hollow. To the wolves who passed him, he was nothing. Less than nothing. Just another vagabond who had wandered too close to civilized territory. The transformation was necessary. If Alderaan had arrived as himself, as the Alpha King, every citizen would have presented their best face. The truth would have remained hidden beneath layers of performance and pretense. But as a beggar, invisible and beneath notice, he could see what they believed no one important was watching. What he saw made his wolf snarl with barely contained rage. The market square bustled with morning activity. Merchants arranged their wares, calling out prices for bread and cheese and dried meat. Noble wolves strolled past in fine clothing, their servants trailing behind with baskets. Guards stood at regular intervals, their expressions bored but watchful. And in the corner, near the well, a line of Omegas waited. Alderaan moved closer, keeping to the shadows. He counted 12 Omegas, all of them thin, all of them carrying the exhausted slump of people who worked too hard for too little. They stood in silence, eyes downcast, while 2 guards checked names against a ledger. "Mira of the Western Quarter," one guard called out. "You owe 3 silver for this month." A young Omega stepped forward, her hands trembling as she held out a small pouch. The guard emptied it onto his palm, counted the coins, then shook his head. 2 silver and 6 copper. That's not 3 silver. Please, the Omega whispered. My child is sick. I had to buy medicine. I'll have the rest by next week, I swear. The guard's hand shot out, gripping her arm hard enough to make her gasp. The tax is due today. You know the penalty for late payment. I'll pay it. Another Omega stepped forward, older, her face lined with worry. I have the extra silver. Please, don't take her. The guard considered this, then shrugged and accepted the additional coin. The young Omega stumbled back, tears streaming down her face, while the older woman returned to the line with shoulders bowed under the weight of her sacrifice. Alderon's hands clenched into fists. He forced himself to remain still, to observe rather than act. Not yet. He needed to see how deep the corruption ran. The line continued. Some Omegas paid, others couldn't. Those who fell short were marked in the ledger with a notation that Alderon couldn't quite see from his position. But he could read the fear in their expressions well enough. Then a pregnant Omega reached the front of the line. She was perhaps 6 months along, her belly swollen with life, her face pale with exhaustion. When the guard called her name, she stepped forward and held out her payment with shaking hands. The guard counted it, then looked up with a cruel smile. This is last month's payment. You still owe for this month. But I paid last month, the Omega protested. You marked it in the ledger yourself. I saw you. Are you calling me a liar? The guard's voice rose, drawing attention from nearby merchants. Are you suggesting that I, an official representative of this pack, would falsify records? No, the Omega's voice broke. I just meant... Seize her. The second guard grabbed the pregnant Omega's arm, hauling her away from the line. She cried out, stumbling, her free hand pressed protectively over her belly. Please! The baby! Should have thought of that before you tried to cheat the pack, the first guard said coldly. He made another notation in his ledger. 7 days in the stocks. Maybe that will teach you to pay your debts honestly. The pregnant Omega was dragged away, her sobs echoing across the square. The remaining Omegas in line kept their heads down, too frightened to protest or defend her. Alderon watched the faces of the other wolves in the market. Merchants continued their business. Noble wolves looked away, uncomfortable but unwilling to intervene. A few showed obvious satisfaction, as though the Omega's punishment confirmed their belief in proper social order. Not one person spoke up. The Alpha King committed every face to memory. The guards who enforced unjust laws. The nobles who benefited from Omega exploitation. The merchants who witnessed suffering and chose profit over compassion. All of them complicit in a system that ground the weakest members of his pack into dust. He wanted to shift right there in the square, to let his wolf tear through the pretense and show them what an Alpha King's rage looked like when unleashed. Instead, he shuffled closer to a fruit vendor's stall, playing the part of a beggar hoping for scraps. The vendor saw him and spat. Get away from here. You're driving off my customers. Alderon shambled backward, affecting confusion. Another merchant threw a rock that struck his shoulder, not hard enough to truly hurt, but painful in its contempt. Filthy vagrant, someone muttered. He spent the rest of the day wandering the pack's streets, testing the boundaries of their cruelty. Not a single person offered help. Instead, they kicked at him when he sat too close to their shops, cursed him when his presence offended their sensibilities, threw garbage at him for sport. By the time evening approached, Alderon's understanding was complete. The corruption ran deeper than taxes and falsified ledgers. It had infected the pack's very soul, creating a hierarchy where strength meant everything and weakness deserved only scorn. As darkness fell, he made his way toward the castle stables. His body was genuinely weary now, the day's humiliations combining with the strain of suppressing his alpha nature. He had eaten nothing, drunk nothing, maintaining the guise of a starving beggar with uncomfortable authenticity. The stable wall provided shelter from the wind. Alderon settled against it, letting his eyes drift closed. He wasn't truly unconscious, merely conserving energy. But to anyone passing he would appear to have collapsed from exhaustion. Time passed. The castle grew quiet as servants finished their duties and retired for the night. Alderon's wolf stirred restlessly, unhappy with the vulnerability of their position, but trusting his human half's plan. Then he heard footsteps. Light, quick, but heavy with exhaustion. Someone approaching from the direction of the stables. Alderaan kept his breathing slow and even, his body slack against the wall. The footsteps stopped. "Oh no," a woman's voice murmured. "Are you hurt?" Alderaan didn't respond, maintaining his unconscious act. He heard her move closer, felt her presence as she knelt beside him. "Sir? Can you hear me?" Soft hands touched his shoulder, shaking him gently. The touch was careful, concerned rather than afraid. Alderaan let his eyes flutter open, affecting confusion. The woman kneeling beside him had chestnut hair that fell in tangled waves around her face. Her green eyes were wide with worry, studying him in the dim light from the stable lanterns. She wore the rough clothing of a servant, stained and threadbare, and her hands were red and raw from labor. "You're awake," she said with obvious relief. "I thought you might be." She didn't finish the sentence, but Alderaan knew what she had feared, that he was dying, that she had found a corpse rather than a living man. He tried to speak and found his throat genuinely dry. The woman seemed to understand. She reached for a leather flask at her belt, uncorking it and holding it to his lips. "Drink slowly," she instructed. The water was lukewarm and slightly stale, but Alderaan accepted it gratefully, taking small sips as she directed. When he'd had sufficient, she pulled back, studying him with those remarkable green eyes. "When did you last eat?" she asked. Alderaan hesitated, then rasped, "Yesterday." The lie came easily. In truth, he had eaten a full breakfast before beginning his disguise. But the beggar he pretended to be would not have had that luxury. The woman's expression tightened with sympathy. She glanced around as though checking for witnesses, then reached into her apron and pulled out a small loaf of bread. It was the only food she carried. Alderaan could see that clearly. No hidden supplies, no additional provisions. Just one loaf, slightly stale, barely large enough to feed a single person for a day. "Here," she said, breaking the bread in half. She offered him the larger portion. "It's not much, but it should help." Alderaan stared at the bread, then at her face. She was thin, gaunt even, showing clear signs of malnutrition. Her clothes hung loose on her frame. The shadows under her eyes spoke of too little sleep, too much work, too many days of going without. And yet she was offering him half her food. His wolf surged forward, recognition flaring through his consciousness so powerfully that Alderaan nearly lost control of his suppressed aura. Something about this woman called to him on a level deeper than thought, deeper than reason. The scent of her, snow and pine, and something uniquely her own, wrapped around him. "I can't take this," he heard himself say. "You need it more than I do." She smiled, and despite the exhaustion in her face, despite the obvious hardship of her life, the expression was genuine. "I've already eaten today. Please, take it." The lie was so transparent that Alderaan's chest tightened. She was starving, clearly. And yet she sat here offering food to a stranger without hesitation or expectation of reward. "What's your name?" he asked, accepting the bread, because refusing would insult her kindness. "Catherine." She settled back on her heels, watching him eat. "What's yours?" Alderaan had prepared an answer for this. "Thomas," he said, using a common enough name that wouldn't draw attention. "Well, Thomas, you picked a dangerous place to collapse. The guards patrol here twice a night. If they find you, they'll throw you in the stocks or worse. I'll move along then." He made as though to stand, then swayed convincingly. Catherine reached out to steady him, her hands gentle but firm. "Wait. You're too weak to travel." She bit her lip, thinking. "There's a corner of the stables where no one looks. It's warm and dry. If you're quiet and leave before dawn, the stable master won't notice. Why would you help me?" Alderaan asked quietly. "You don't know me." Catherine looked at him for a long moment. In the flickering lamplight, her green eyes seemed to hold depths of sadness that no one her age should carry. "Because everyone deserves kindness," she said simply. "Even strangers. Especially strangers." She stood, offering him her hand. Alderaan took it, noting the calluses on her palm, the strength in her grip despite her obvious exhaustion. She led him into the stables, past rows of drowsing horses, to a small corner where hay bales created a natural shelter. "Hide behind these if you hear anyone coming," Catherine instructed. "And please, be gone by first light. I don't want you to get hurt." "Where are you going?" Alderaan asked. "Home. I have someone waiting for me." The way she said it, the protective note in her voice, told him that someone was important. Family, perhaps. Someone who depended on her the way she clearly depended on no one else. Catherine turned to leave, then paused. "Thomas, if you're still here tomorrow night, I'll bring more food. Not much, but something. You don't have to do that." "I know." She smiled again, that same sad, genuine expression. "But I will anyway." Then she was gone, her footsteps fading into the night. Alderaan sat in the hay-scented darkness, the half loaf of bread still in his hands. His wolf paced restlessly in his mind, confused by the strength of their reaction to this Omega woman. She was nothing like what he had expected to find. Not broken, despite the clear evidence of her suffering. Not cruel, despite the cruelty surrounding her. Just quietly, persistently kind. He thought of the pregnant Omega dragged away to the stocks, the guards falsifying records, Baelor's smooth lies, the system of corruption that had infected his pack like rot in timber. And he thought of Catherine, dividing her last food with a stranger and expecting nothing in return. Tomorrow, he would continue his investigation. He would gather evidence, learn names, understand the full extent of the betrayal. But tonight, sitting in a stable corner with the gift of a kind Omega's compassion, Alderaan made a silent vow. He would fix this, all of it, no matter what it cost. And somehow, he would find a way to repay Catherine for the bread she could not afford to share, but shared anyway. Chapter 3. Shadows and Whispers. 3 days passed in a strange rhythm of deception and discovery. During daylight hours, Alderaan played his role perfectly. He shambled through the packed streets with hunched shoulders and vacant expression, a mute beggar too broken to even speak. The silence served him well. People talked freely around those they considered beneath notice, and Alderaan heard things no Alpha King was meant to hear. He learned that the corruption ran deeper than falsified tax records. On the first day, he followed a group of guards to a warehouse near the docks. Through a broken slat in the wooden wall, he watched them divide silver coins into 3 piles. 2 guards took 1 pile each. The third, largest pile was placed in a locked chest marked with Baelor's personal seal. "How many Omegas this month?" one guard asked. 15 signed servitude contracts, another replied. 3 more disappeared before they could be processed. Probably ran. Baelor wants them found. Can't have Omegas thinking they can escape their debts. They won't get far. Rogues will take care of them if the wilderness doesn't. The guards laughed, casual and cruel, as though discussing the weather rather than lives destroyed. Alderaan memorized their faces. When this was over, when he revealed himself, these men would answer for every Omega they had broken. On the second day, he witnessed a young Omega woman dragged from her home. She clutched a small child to her chest, screaming that she had paid, that the ledger was wrong, that she had witnesses. The guards didn't care. They tore the child from her arms, gave it to a neighbor, and hauled the woman away while her baby wailed. Alderaan's hands shook with the effort of maintaining his disguise. His wolf raged inside, demanding he shift, demanding he tear apart anyone who would separate a mother from her child. But revealing himself now would only alert Baelor. The counselor would destroy evidence, silence witnesses, and the corruption would continue under a more careful guise. So Alderaan waited, watched, remembered, but the nights were different. Each evening, as darkness fell and the castle grew quiet, Catherine came to the stables. She always carried food. Never much, just scraps she had saved from her own meager portions. Stale bread, wrinkled vegetables. Once, a small piece of cheese that she divided carefully, giving him the larger half. They talked in whispers, careful not to draw attention. "You're still here," Catherine said on the first night, settling beside him in the hay with obvious exhaustion. "You told me I could stay," Alderaan replied, maintaining the hoarse voice of a man unused to speaking. "I wasn't sure you would." She handed him a turnip and half a carrot. "Most people leave before dawn. They don't want to risk the stable master's temper." I have nowhere else to go. It wasn't entirely a lie. As Thomas the beggar, he truly had no other shelter. Catherine accepted this with a solemn nod, as though she understood homelessness in a way most people never would. "What's your story?" she asked quietly. "If you want to tell it, I mean. You don't have to." Alderaan had prepared a background for his character. "I'm from the Eastern Territories. Had a small farm once. Drought took the crops 3 years running. Couldn't pay the landlord. Lost everything. I'm sorry." Catherine's voice held genuine sympathy. "It's not fair, is it? How easy it is to lose everything and how hard to build it back." "No," Alderaan agreed. "It's not fair." They sat in companionable silence for a while. Then Catherine spoke again, her voice softer now, almost dreamlike. "I have a brother, Owen. He's 16. She paused, as though deciding whether to continue. "He was born without a wolf. Some shifters are, sometimes. Just one of those things that happens." Alderaan knew this, of course. Genetic anomalies occurred in perhaps 1 out of every 500 births. Most packs cared for these individuals, recognizing that their inability to shift didn't diminish their worth. But some packs, particularly those where corruption had rotted the leadership, saw them as burdens. "The pack treats him as defective," Catherine continued. "They won't let him work, won't train him in any trade, say that feeding him is a waste of resources." Her hands clenched in her lap. "But he's smart. So smart. He taught himself to read from old books we found. He knows more about pack history than most of the elders. He just needs someone to give him a chance. And you work to support both of you," Alderaan said. "I do what I have to do." Catherine's voice held quiet determination. "Someday I'll have saved enough. We'll leave this place. Find a pack that judges people by their character instead of their ability to shift. Owen will have a real life. That's all I want." The fierce protectiveness in her voice made Alderaan's wolf stir with admiration. Here was an Omega who would fight heaven itself for those she loved, who sacrificed her own well-being without hesitation or complaint. "That's a good dream," he said softly. Catherine smiled, tired but genuine. "It keeps me going." She left soon after, promising to return the next evening. Alderaan sat alone in the darkness, thinking about a young Omega with impossible dreams and the brother she refused to abandon. On the second night, Catherine arrived carrying only a crust of bread. "I'm sorry," she said, dividing it with obvious guilt. "The laundry mistress docked my pay again. This is all I have." "Then you should keep it," Alderaan protested. "We share or neither of us eats." Her tone brooked no argument. "Those are the rules." Alderaan accepted his portion because refusing would hurt her. They ate slowly, making the bread last as long as possible. "Tell me something," Catherine said after they had finished. "Something about your life before. Something happy." It was a strange request, but Alderaan understood it. She wanted escape, even if only through stories. So he told her about the Eastern Territories he supposedly came from, inventing details about festivals and harvest celebrations, about neighbors who helped each other and children who played in fields of wildflowers. Catherine listened with closed eyes, a faint smile on her face. When he described a ridiculous incident involving a runaway pig and a pompous merchant, she laughed, actually laughed, clear and bright, and surprised by her own joy. The sound went through Alderaan like lightning. His wolf surged forward, recognition flaring so powerfully that he nearly lost control of his suppressed aura. That laugh, that genuine moment of happiness despite her suffering, called to something fundamental in his nature. And her scent. He had noticed it before, but tonight it seemed stronger. Snow and pine, crisp and clean. Nothing like the typical Omega scent of honey and warmth. It wrapped around him, called to his wolf, made him want things he had no right to want while wearing a beggar's disguise. "Thank you," Catherine said softly when she could speak again. "I haven't laughed in so long. I forgot what it felt like." "You should laugh more," Alderaan heard himself say. "Maybe when Owen and I are free." She stood, brushing hay from her worn skirt. "I should go. But Thomas, thank you for the stories, for making things feel less heavy, even just for a moment." She left, and Alderon sat in the darkness with his wolf pressing insistently against his consciousness. Something was building between them, something his wolf recognized even if Alderon himself didn't fully understand it yet. The third day shattered any pretense of normalcy. Alderon had spent the morning observing a meeting between Baelor and several pack elders. They discussed expanding the debt servitude program to include not just Omegas, but any shifter deemed economically unproductive. The casual way they planned to enslave their own people made Alderon's blood boil. But what happened in the afternoon was worse. He had positioned himself near the castle kitchen, pretending to search for scraps in the waste pile. Through the open door, he could see servants moving about their duties. Catherine was there, scrubbing a large cauldron, her arms deep in soapy water. Then Baelor entered. The beta counselor moved through the kitchen with proprietary confidence, inspecting food stores and questioning servants. When he reached Catherine, he stopped. "You," he said coldly. "What's your name?" "Catherine, my lord." She kept her eyes down, her posture submissive. "Catherine, the Omega with the defective brother." Baelor's lip curled. "I've been reviewing accounts. There's a discrepancy in the kitchen stores. 2 loaves of bread are missing from yesterday's count." The head cook, an older woman with flour on her apron, spoke up quickly. "My lord, I may have miscounted." Silence. Baelor's command cut through the room. "I'm addressing the Omega." Catherine's face had gone pale. "My lord, I haven't taken anything. I swear it. Guards found breadcrumbs in the servants' quarters, in the area where you sleep." Baelor pulled a small cloth from his robes, letting it fall open to reveal crumbs. "Do you deny this evidence?" It was a setup. Alderon could see that clearly. The crumbs were probably from Catherine's own meager rations, or planted by someone following Baelor's orders. But in a pack where Omegas had no rights and no voice, evidence didn't matter. Catherine's voice shook. "I didn't steal anything, my lord. Please. Those crumbs are from the bread I earned washing clothes. The laundry mistress can confirm. The laundry mistress reports that you've been taking food meant for the pack's working members and giving it to vagrants." Baelor's voice rose, carrying to every corner of the kitchen. "You steal from those who contribute to pack prosperity, to feed worthless beggars who produce nothing." Catherine's eyes widened with realization and horror. Someone had seen her feeding Thomas. Someone had reported it to Baelor. "My lord, I only gave away food that was mine to give. I earned it through my work. Your work barely covers your own keep, let alone feeding strays." Baelor stepped closer, looming over her. "You're a drain on pack resources, Omega. You and your broken brother both. The only reason you're tolerated at all is because you're marginally useful as cheap labor." Catherine sank to her knees, and Alderon saw her hands trembling. "Please, my lord. I'll work harder. I'll take on more duties. Just don't. Your monthly debt payment is hereby doubled," Baelor announced. 4 silver coins per month starting immediately. If you cannot pay, you and your brother will be expelled from pack territory within 3 days. 4 silver coins. An impossible sum. Catherine made perhaps 2 copper coins a week if she was lucky. Even working herself to death, she couldn't earn 4 silver in a month. It was a death sentence disguised as a debt. "My lord, please." Catherine's voice broke. "My brother can't survive outside pack territory. He has no wolf. The rogues will kill him. Please, there must be another way. Then you'll work harder." Baelor's voice was cold, final. "Or you'll both learn what happens to those who steal from the pack." He turned and swept from the kitchen, leaving Catherine kneeling on the floor, shaking silently. The other servants quickly returned to their work, eyes averted. No one helped her. No one spoke in her defense. They were all too afraid. Alderon stood frozen in the doorway, his entire body rigid with barely controlled rage. His wolf was howling inside, demanding he shift, demanding he tear Baelor apart right there. Only years of discipline kept him from revealing himself. Not yet. Just a little longer. Gather the evidence, build the case. Then justice would come for all of them. But watching Catherine struggle to her feet, watching her return to scrubbing the cauldron with tears streaming down her face, Alderon wondered how much longer he could maintain the deception. That night, Catherine came to the stables late, long after her usual time. Alderon heard her footsteps. heard the way she tried to muffle her sobs. She collapsed in the hay beside him without speaking, her whole body shaking. Alderaan didn't know what to say, how to comfort her without breaking character. So he did the only thing he could think of. He shifted closer, offering his presence as shelter. Catherine turned into him instinctively, pressing her face against his ragged shirt, crying silently as though even her grief had to be contained. Her hands clutched at the fabric, holding on as though he were the only stable thing in a world that had turned completely cruel. "I don't know what to do," she whispered finally. "I can't earn 4 silver in 3 days. I can't even earn it in 3 months. But if we leave, Owen will die. He can't defend himself. The rogues will tear him apart." Alderaan wrapped one arm carefully around her shoulders. "We'll find a way," he said, the words inadequate but all he could offer. "There is no way." Her voice was hollow. "This is how it ends. I've always known it would end like this. I just hoped we'd have more time." She cried until she had no tears left, until exhaustion claimed her completely. Her breathing gradually slowed and deepened, her body going slack against his. Alderaan held her as she slept, feeling her heartbeat against his chest, breathing in that unique scent of snow and pine that marked her as different from every other Omega he had ever known. His wolf pressed forward, protective and possessive in equal measure. "Mine," it whispered. "Ours to protect, ours to keep safe." Tomorrow, Alderaan would end this charade. Tomorrow, he would reveal himself and bring justice down on Baelor and every corrupt guard and elder who had participated in this systematic cruelty. But tonight, he held an exhausted Omega who had shown him more genuine kindness than anyone he had met in years, and made a silent promise. He would save her. He would save her brother. And he would make certain that no one in his pack ever suffered like this again. Whatever it took. Chapter 4. The king unveiled dawn broke cold over the stable where Alderaan had spent his 4th night as a beggar. He hadn't slept. Catherine had left hours ago, her eyes still red from crying, her steps heavy with hopelessness. She believed she had 3 days left. 3 days before she and Owen would be cast out to die. Alderaan couldn't let that happen. He was preparing to leave his hiding spot when he heard footsteps approaching, slow, deliberate, accompanied by the tap of a walking stick against stone. The scent reached him before the person did. Herbs and age and something indefinably wise. An old woman appeared in the doorway of the stable corner, her gray hair bound in a neat braid, her weathered face sharp with intelligence. She wore the simple robes of a healer, and her eyes, pale blue and knowing, fixed on Alderaan with unsettling accuracy. "You can stop pretending now, my lord," she said quietly. "There's no one here but us." Alderaan went very still. His hand moved instinctively toward the concealed blade at his belt, but the woman made no threatening moves. She simply stood there, waiting. "I don't know what you mean," he said, maintaining the hoarse voice of Thomas the beggar. The old woman smiled, sad and knowing. "I'm Meredith. I've been pack healer for 43 years. I served your father, and his father before him. Did you truly think I wouldn't recognize the scent of my Alpha King, even beneath dirt and rags?" Alderaan studied her for a long moment, weighing options. Then, slowly, he allowed his Alpha aura to surface. Just a fraction, just enough to confirm what she already knew. Meredith's eyes widened slightly, but she didn't flinch or bow. Instead, she stepped closer, her voice dropping even lower. "How long have you been watching?" she asked. 4 days. Long enough to see the corruption eating this pack from within. Alderaan stood, brushing hay from his ragged clothes. "Tell me, Meredith, how long has Baelor been stealing from Omegas?" "Years. Since before your father died." Meredith's expression darkened. It started small. A copper coin here, an extra tax there. But it grew, and anyone who spoke against it disappeared or was discredited so thoroughly that no one believed them. "Why didn't you come to me?" "I tried. Twice." Meredith's voice carried old pain. "Both times my messages never reached you. Baelor controls who has access to the Alpha King. He's built a wall around you, my lord, made of loyal guards and carefully filtered information." Alderaan's jaw clenched. He had been a fool. surrounded himself with his father's old counselors because he thought their experience would help him rebuild. Instead, they had used his trust to create their own kingdom of cruelty. "Tell me about Catherine," he said abruptly. Meredith's expression shifted to something gentler. "Ah, the Omega who's been feeding you. She told me about her brother, about their parents dying 5 years ago, about the debt Baylor claims they owe." Alderaan paused. "But there's something else. Something about her scent. It's different from other Omegas. That's because she's not ordinary." Meredith moved to sit on a hay bale, her old bones creaking. "Catherine descends from the Silvermane line. Ancient royal blood that was thought lost 3 generations ago when the family was killed in the territory wars." Alderaan's breath caught. The Silvermane line. He knew the stories, powerful Omegas who could command other wolves, who served as advisors and strategists to Alpha Kings. They had been hunted to extinction by rival packs who feared their influence. "That's why her shift came late," Meredith continued. "Royal Omega bloodlines manifest differently. Slower, but stronger. If Catherine were properly trained, if she understood what she was, she would be extraordinarily powerful. She could stand as Luna Queen and command respect from every pack in the realm. But Baylor knows this. Oh yes, he's kept her weak deliberately, overworked, underfed, isolated. He makes sure she has no time or energy to develop her abilities. And threatening her brother keeps her compliant." Meredith's eyes hardened. Catherine would be dangerous to his plans. A royal Omega at the Alpha King's side would have the authority to investigate pack finances, to question his decisions. So he grinds her down, keeps her desperate and invisible. Alderaan's wolf surged forward, protective instincts roaring. "And the increased debt? 4 silver coins? A death sentence. He wants her gone before you have a chance to notice her." Meredith met his gaze steadily. "Though I suspect it's too late for that, isn't it, my lord? You've noticed her already." Alderaan didn't answer. He didn't need to. His wolf's reaction to Catherine had been impossible to hide from someone as observant as Meredith. "What are you going to do?" the old healer asked. "End this." Alderaan's voice carried the weight of command. "Today, I need you to keep silent for a few more hours." "Can you do that?" Meredith smiled. "I've kept silent for years, my lord. A few more hours won't matter." She left, and Alderaan began stripping away his disguise. The dirt, the rags, the carefully maintained posture of defeat. Beneath it all, the Alpha King emerged. By the time he strode from the stables, every inch of him radiated power. The great hall of the capital castle could hold 500 wolves when fully packed. Today, it held nearly that many. Guards had gone through the territory at Alderaan's command, delivered in his true voice with all his alpha authority behind it. "Convene an emergency pack meeting. Every adult shifter. The throne room, noon, no exceptions." Confusion rippled through the assembled crowd. Baylor stood near the front, his expression carefully neutral. But Alderaan could see the calculation in his eyes. The beta counselor didn't know what was happening, but he was already planning how to turn it to his advantage. Catherine was there too, though she didn't know why. She'd been pulled from her washing duties by a guard who'd simply told her that attendance was mandatory. She stood near the back of the hall, head down, trying to make herself invisible among the crowd. Alderaan took his place on the throne, finally clean, finally dressed in the deep blue robes of his station. His black hair fell loose around his shoulders, his beard neatly trimmed. He looked every inch the king he was born to be. The hall fell silent as his alpha aura filled the space, pressing against every wolf present until they had no choice but to acknowledge his authority. "I stand before you today to address a matter of treason," Alderaan began, his voice carrying to every corner. "For 4 days, I have walked among you disguised as a beggar. For 4 days, I have witnessed corruption so deep, so pervasive, that it threatens the very foundation of our pack." Shocked murmurs erupted. Baylor's expression flickered, just for a moment, before settling back into careful neutrality. "Baylor, beta counselor, step forward." Baylor moved with confidence, bowing respectfully. "My lord, I don't understand. What corruption do you speak of?" The systematic exploitation of omegas through falsified debts and impossible taxes. Alderaan pulled out a sheaf of papers, records he'd copied during his nights in the stable, evidence he'd gathered from overheard conversations. For years, you have been stealing from the weakest members of this pack, forcing them into servitude, selling their labor, and pocketing the profits. These are lies. Baelor's voice rose with perfectly performed outrage. My lord, someone has been feeding you false information. I serve this pack faithfully. I watched guards collect taxes that were never recorded. I saw a pregnant omega dragged to the stocks for a debt she had already paid. I witnessed you personally threaten an omega with expulsion for crimes she did not commit. Alderaan stood, descending from the throne with lethal grace. Do you deny these accusations? I deny them absolutely. Baelor turned to address the crowd, his voice carrying practiced conviction. Our Alpha King has been deceived by malcontents who seek to undermine pack stability. The taxes are legal. The debts are real. Everything I have done has been for the good of... Enough. The word cracked through the hall with alpha command. Every wolf flinched, unable to resist the compulsion. Even Baelor staggered slightly. Guards, Alderaan commanded. Arrest Baelor and any man who has participated in his schemes. For a moment, the guards hesitated. Some had been taking Baelor's bribes for years. Others simply didn't know whom to obey. Then loyal guards moved forward, hands on weapons. Baelor's mask finally cracked. His eyes darted around the hall, calculating odds, searching for escape routes. When he moved, it was with desperate speed. He lunged sideways, grabbed the nearest person, and hauled them in front of him as a shield. Catherine. She had been washing the stairs at the edge of the hall, invisible in her servant's dress. Now she was suddenly at the center of everything, a dagger pressed against her throat, Baelor's arm locked around her waist. Stay back, Baelor shouted. All of you stay back or I'll kill her. Alderaan froze. His entire body locked with the effort of controlling his wolf, which was howling with rage and terror. Catherine's green eyes were wide with shock, staring directly at him. And in that moment, he saw the recognition bloom across her face. The beggar. Thomas. The man she had fed and comforted for 4 nights. He was the Alpha King. My lord, Baelor said, breathing hard, backing toward a side door with Catherine pressed against him. I'm leaving. Let me go, and I'll release the Omega once I'm safely away. You're not leaving this castle, Alderaan said, his voice deadly quiet. And you're not taking her anywhere. Then she dies. Baelor pressed the blade harder. A thin line of blood appeared on Catherine's throat. Alderaan's wolf exploded inside him. The Alpha King's roar shook the castle to its foundations, a sound of pure dominance and rage that forced every wolf in the hall to their knees. Every wolf except Baelor, who had already committed treason and was beyond the reach of pack bonds. But the roar bought seconds. Catherine, operating on pure instinct, went limp in Baelor's grip, a move that threw him off balance for just a moment. It was all Alderaan needed. He was across the hall before anyone could blink, moving with inhuman speed. His hand caught Baelor's wrist, crushing bones until the beta dropped his dagger with a scream. Catherine fell. Loyal guards caught her, pulling her to safety, while Alderaan slammed Baelor against the stone wall hard enough to crack ribs. You threatened what is mine, Alderaan snarled, his eyes blazing with wolf fire. You hurt what belongs to me. She's nothing, Baelor gasped. Just an Omega, just... Alderaan's fist connected with his jaw, and Baelor went limp. The hall was silent except for harsh breathing. Every wolf stared at their Alpha King, who stood over the unconscious body of his traitorous counselor, with blood on his knuckles and murder in his eyes. Take him to the dungeons, Alderaan commanded, and arrest every guard who participated in his schemes, every elder who knew and said nothing, every merchant who benefited from Omega exploitation. I want names. I want records. And I want justice. Guards scrambled to obey. The crowd began to disperse, shocked and frightened by what they had witnessed, but Alderaan's attention was no longer on them. He turned to where Catherine stood, supported by guards, one hand pressed to her bleeding throat. Their eyes met across the hall. She looked terrified, not of Baelor now, but of him, of the king she hadn't known existed, of the beggar who had been a lie. "Catherine," Alderaan said softly, taking a step toward her. She flinched back, and something in his chest cracked. "I need to speak with you," he continued, gentle despite the wolf still raging inside. "Please, let me explain." Catherine stared at him for a long moment. Then, very quietly, she whispered, "You lied to me." And before he could respond, she turned and ran from the hall. Alderaan watched her go, his hands clenched at his sides, knowing he couldn't chase her. Not now. Not when she was so clearly frightened. He had saved her from Baelor's debt. Saved her from expulsion. But he might have lost her trust forever. Chapter 5. Blood and Bonds. Catherine ran. She didn't know where she was going, only that she needed to be away from the throne room, away from the Alpha King who had been Thomas, away from the lies and the truth tangled together until she couldn't tell which hurt more. Her feet carried her through corridors she barely recognized, past startled servants and confused guards. The cut on her throat still bled, a warm trickle that soaked into her collar, but she didn't care. Physical pain was nothing compared to the betrayal burning in her chest. He had lied. For 4 nights, she had opened her heart to a beggar, shared her fears and dreams with someone she thought understood what it meant to be powerless. And all along, he had been the most powerful wolf in the realm, watching her like some kind of experiment. Had he laughed at her? Pitied her? Found her pathetic devotion to her broken brother amusing? Catherine's vision blurred with tears. She turned a corner and found herself in an empty corridor lined with tapestries. A window at the far end showed the castle gates. Freedom. If she could just reach Owen, they could run, disappear into the wilderness before anyone stopped them. They would die out there eventually, but at least it would be on their own terms, not crushed beneath the weight of royal games she didn't understand. She was halfway to the window when a hand clamped around her arm. "Going somewhere, Omega?" Catherine spun. Baelor stood behind her, his face bruised from where Alderaan had struck him, his eyes wild with desperation. Blood trickled from his split lip, and his fine robes were torn. "How did you—" Catherine tried to pull away. "The guards were taking you to the dungeons. Some guards are still loyal to those who pay well." Baelor's grip tightened painfully. "And I've been paying very well for years." He dragged her toward a side door Catherine hadn't noticed. She struggled, trying to shift, trying to find her wolf, but panic scattered her focus. The transformation wouldn't come. "Stop fighting," Baelor hissed. "You're coming with me. You're the only leverage I have left." The side door opened onto a servant's stairway that led down to the castle's lower levels. Baelor hauled Catherine down the steps, moving with the frantic energy of a man who had nothing left to lose. "Where are you taking me?" Catherine gasped. "Out. Away. Anywhere the Alpha King can't follow." Baelor's laugh was bitter. "Did you know, little Omega, that you're royalty? That you descend from a bloodline so ancient and powerful that an Alpha who bound himself to you could claim legitimacy over every pack in the realm?" Catherine stared at him, certain he had lost his mind. "I'm a washerwoman. I'm nobody. You're a Silvermane." Baelor shoved her through another door, and suddenly they were outside, in the castle's outer courtyard. "Your grandmother was the last of the line. She went into hiding after the territory wars, changed her name, bore children who never knew what they were. Your father never knew. But I discovered the truth years ago when I was researching noble bloodlines. They were moving toward the gates now. Catherine could see freedom beyond them, the forest that surrounded the Capital Pack's territory. But she couldn't run. Not without Owen. "My brother," she pleaded. "Please, let me get my brother. Your brother is leverage for later." Baelor pulled a knife from his belt, pressing it against her ribs. "Right now, you're going to walk calmly through these gates with me. One wrong move, one sound, and I'll gut you where you stand." Catherine's mind raced. She had to do something, had to fight. But what? She was weak, untrained, barely able to shift even when calm. Against Baelor's experience and desperation, she had no chance. They were 10 steps from the gate when she heard it. A howl that shook the very air. so full of rage and dominance that every wolf in hearing distance would feel it in their bones. Catherine's own wolf stirred in response, recognizing something fundamental in that sound. Baelor stumbled, looking back toward the castle. Alderon stood on the ramparts above, his blue eyes blazing with wolf fire. Even from this distance, Catherine could feel his fury, his absolute refusal to let Baelor escape. "You think you can stop me?" Baelor shouted up at him. "I'll kill her. I swear You'll die first." The voice came from everywhere and nowhere. Then Alderon was moving, leaping from the ramparts with impossible grace. He landed in a crouch between Baelor and the gate, blocking their escape. And Catherine saw, for the first time, what an alpha king truly was. Power radiated from Alderon in waves that made the air shimmer. His aura, no longer suppressed, pressed against her consciousness with overwhelming force. This wasn't the gentle beggar who had accepted half a loaf of bread. This was a predator, ancient and deadly, who could tear apart armies with his bare hands. "Let her go," Alderon said quietly. "So you can throw me in the dungeons? So I can rot while you parade your new Omega prize around court?" Baelor laughed wildly. "I had plans. I was going to marry her to Lord Fenwick's son, use her bloodline to create a new royal house. We could have overthrown you, claimed the throne through legitimate succession. You were going to enslave her." Alderon took a step forward. "Force her into a bond she didn't want. Use her like a piece on a game board. She's an Omega. That's what they're for." The words were barely out of Baelor's mouth before Alderon moved. But this time, Baelor was ready. He grabbed Catherine, spinning her in front of him, knife pressed hard against her throat. "Shift and she dies," Baelor screamed. "I'll cut her throat before you take a second step." Alderon froze. Catherine could see the conflict in his face, the war between his wolf's instinct to attack and his need to keep her safe. "Catherine," Alderon said, his voice carrying across the courtyard with eerie calm. "Do you trust me?" She should say no. Should hate him for lying, for using her, for being everything she could never be. But when she looked into those blue eyes, she saw the beggar who had listened to her dreams, who had made her laugh for the first time in years. "Yes," she whispered. "Then shift. Let your wolf out. I know you're scared, but I'll be right here. I won't let anything happen to you." "She can't shift," Baelor snarled. "She's too weak, too broken. Shift, Catherine." It was an alpha command, but gentle, coaxing rather than forcing. Catherine felt her wolf respond, pushing toward the surface with desperate eagerness. It had been suppressed for so long, locked away by fear and exhaustion and the constant grind of survival. Now, it wanted out. The transformation began, and it was agony. Catherine had only shifted once fully, and that had been years ago. Her body fought the change, bones trying to reshape, muscles tearing and reknitting. She screamed, the sound turning into a howl as her vocal cords changed. Baelor tried to hold on, but a partially shifted Omega was stronger than a human. Catherine felt her jaw elongate, felt teeth sharpen. Instinct took over where training should have been. She twisted, sank new fangs into Baelor's wrist. He shrieked, releasing her. Catherine fell forward onto hands that were becoming paws. Her body caught between forms, neither human nor wolf, but something in between. And then Alderon was there. He shifted mid-leap, his human form dissolving into something magnificent and terrifying. The black wolf that landed beside Catherine was enormous, easily twice the size of any normal wolf. His fur seemed to absorb light, and his eyes burned with blue fire. Baelor tried to run. Alderon's jaws closed on his shoulder, dragging him down. The beta screamed, thrashing, but he was no match for an alpha king in full fury. The battle was brief and brutal. Alderon fought with controlled violence, each bite and slash calculated to disable rather than kill. When Baelor finally stopped struggling, blood soaking into the courtyard stones, Alderon released him and stepped back. Guards poured from the castle, these ones truly loyal. They surrounded Baelor's broken form, weapons drawn. "Take him to the dungeons," Alderon's voice came, human again, though his body was still wolf. The ability to speak while shifted marked him as royalty beyond question. This time, use chains. And guards I trust personally. The soldiers dragged Baelor away. His screams of pain and rage faded into the distance. Then Alderon turned to Catherine. She was still caught between forms, trembling violently. Her body didn't know how to complete the shift or reverse it. She could feel her wolf panicking, trapped halfway between worlds, causing her excruciating pain. Alderon approached slowly, making himself small and non-threatening despite his massive size. He pressed his muzzle against her half-formed face, breathing softly, projecting calm with every fiber of his being. Catherine whimpered, fear and pain overwhelming her. "I've got you." Alderon's voice rumbled through the bond that was forming between them. The mate bond she hadn't known existed. "You're safe now. Let go. Let your wolf retreat. I'll catch you when you fall." She didn't know how to do what he asked, but his presence helped, his alpha authority guiding her stumbling instincts. Slowly, painfully, her body began to shift back. Fur receded, bones reformed, until she collapsed in human form on the cold stone. Alderon shifted back as well, shedding his wolf in one smooth motion. He caught Catherine before she hit the ground, cradling her against his chest. She was shaking, exhausted beyond measure, her mind spinning with shock and pain, and the lingering terror of almost dying. "Owen," she managed to gasp. "My brother is safe. I sent guards to bring him here the moment Baelor escaped." Alderon's voice was gentle, so different from the commanding roar he'd used before. "He's probably in the castle already, worried sick about you. You lied to me." The words came out weak, but they had to be said. "I did." Alderon didn't try to deny it. "I'm sorry, Catherine. I needed to see the truth of what was happening in my pack, and no one shows their true face to a king. But what I felt for you, the conversations we had, none of that was a lie." Catherine wanted to be angry, wanted to rage at him, but exhaustion dragged at her, and his arms felt so safe, and she was so very tired of being afraid. "What happens now?" she whispered. "Now we get that cut on your throat treated. Then you rest. And when you're ready, we talk about what Baelor said, about your bloodline, about what you are." Alderon stood, lifting her easily, but all of that can wait. "Right now, you need to heal." The pack had gathered in the courtyard, watching their Alpha King carry an Omega toward the castle. Catherine saw their faces. Shock, confusion, speculation. Tomorrow she would worry about what they thought. Tomorrow she would deal with the implications of royal blood and mate bonds, and all the impossible things that had happened today. But tonight, held secure in the arms of a king who had once been a beggar, she allowed herself to simply surrender to exhaustion. Alderon carried her through the castle halls, issuing quiet orders to servants as they passed. A healer. Hot water. Clean clothes. Food. Everything delivered to the royal guest chambers, not the servants' quarters where Catherine had always belonged. She drifted in and out of consciousness, catching fragments of conversation, feeling the gentle sway of his steps. At one point she heard a young voice crying her name, felt small hands touching her face. "Owen?" she mumbled. "I'm here, Cat. I'm here. You're going to be okay." Her brother's voice, frightened but safe. That was all that mattered. Later, minutes or hours she couldn't tell, Catherine woke to find herself in a bed softer than anything she'd ever touched. Bandages covered her throat. The room was warm, lit by a crackling fire. Alderon sat in a chair beside the bed, watching her with those intense blue eyes. He'd changed clothes, cleaned the blood from his skin, but worry still etched lines around his mouth. "How do you feel?" he asked quietly, like I was torn apart and put back together wrong. Catherine's voice was hoarse. "But alive. That's a start." Alderon leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Catherine, we need to talk. About your bloodline, about what it means. But if you're too tired, tell me." She needed to understand. Needed to know what Baelor had seen in her that was worth stealing, worth killing for. So Alderon told her. About the Silvermanes. the royal Omegas who had once advised kings, about the power in her blood that would manifest as she grew stronger, about the mate bond that was beginning to form between them, drawn by that ancient bloodline recognizing its complement in an alpha king. And Catherine listened, her world expanding and shattering and reforming with every word, until finally sleep claimed her again. This time, when she dreamed, it was of black wolves and silver fur, of bonds forged in blood and trust, of a future that suddenly held possibilities she'd never dared imagine. Chapter 6. Silver and Trust. Catherine woke to softness. For 3 heartbeats, she didn't remember where she was or what had happened. The bed beneath her was unlike anything she had ever experienced. Plush mattresses, clean linens that smelled of lavender, pillows that cradled her head with gentle firmness. Warmth surrounded her from a fireplace she could hear crackling nearby. Then memory crashed back. Baelor's knife, the forced shift, Alderon's wolf, massive and terrifying, the mate bond thrumming between them even as her world fell apart. She opened her eyes to find herself in a chamber larger than the entire cabin she'd shared with Owen. Tapestries covered stone walls, depicting scenes of wolf hunts and full moons. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, suggesting it was late afternoon. How long had she been unconscious? "You're awake." The voice came from beside the bed. Catherine turned her head to find Meredith sitting in a chair, her weathered hands busy with needlework. The old healer set aside her embroidery and leaned forward, studying Catherine with those sharp blue eyes. "How do you feel?" Meredith asked. Confused. Catherine's throat was dry, her voice rough. "How long have I been sleeping?" 3 days. Your body needed time to recover from the forced shift. That kind of transformation, when you're untrained, takes a tremendous toll. Meredith poured water from a pitcher into a cup, helping Catherine sit up enough to drink. "You're in the royal guest chambers. The Alpha King's orders." The water helped clear some of the fog from Catherine's mind. She became aware of bandages around her throat, the lingering ache in muscles she hadn't known she possessed, and a strange new awareness humming at the edge of her consciousness. "What is that?" she whispered, pressing a hand to her chest where the sensation seemed strongest. "That feeling, like something's pulling at me." "The mate bond." Meredith settled back in her chair. "It's begun to form between you and the Alpha King. Not complete yet, not until you both accept it fully, but strong enough that you can sense each other now." Catherine's hand fell away as though burned. "No, that's not possible. I'm nobody. I'm just... You're a Silvermane." Meredith's voice was gentle, but firm. "And before you tell me that's impossible too, let me explain what Baelor knew, and you didn't." Over the next hour, Meredith told Catherine everything. About the ancient bloodline that ran through her veins, passed down from a grandmother who had fled the territory wars and hidden among common wolves. About the unique abilities that royal Omegas possessed, the capacity to command lesser wolves, to sense truth from lies, to strengthen the bonds that held packs together. About why her shift had come late, why her scent was different, why Baelor had worked so hard to keep her weak and ignorant. "Your power threatens people like Baelor," Meredith explained. "A true royal Omega, properly trained and bonded to an Alpha King, would have the authority to question his decisions, to investigate his corruption. He couldn't allow that." Catherine listened with growing horror and disbelief. "This is madness. You're telling me I'm some kind of lost princess, that I have powers I've never shown any sign of possessing? You've shown the signs. You simply didn't recognize them." Meredith stood, moving to the window. "Tell me, Catherine, how many times have you known, without being told, when someone was lying to you? How often have you sensed danger before it arrived? When you spoke to the horses in the stable, didn't they calm under your voice in ways they didn't for others?" Catherine opened her mouth to deny it, then stopped, because it was true. She had always known when Baelor was lying, had felt it in her bones even when his words sounded convincing. She had sensed the pregnant Omega's terror in the market square before anyone spoke, and the horses in the stable had always quieted when she approached, even the most skittish ones. She had thought these were just coincidences, the product of careful observation. But what if they weren't? Even if this is true, Catherine said slowly. "Even if I am what you say I am, that doesn't mean I want it. I don't want to be anyone's mate. I don't want power or responsibility or any of this." "I understand." Meredith's expression was sympathetic. "But want it or not, the bond is forming. You can reject it, of course. No one can force you to accept a mate you don't choose. But that choice should be made with full knowledge of what you're refusing." Before Catherine could respond, there was a knock at the door. "Enter," Meredith called. The door opened to reveal Alderaan. He had changed from the blood-stained clothes Catherine remembered, now wearing simple dark trousers and a loose white shirt. His black hair was damp, as though he'd recently bathed, and his blue eyes were cautious as they met hers. "I'll give you privacy," Meredith said, gathering her needlework and leaving with a knowing smile. The door closed behind her, and Catherine was alone with the Alpha King. Alderaan didn't approach the bed. Instead, he remained near the door, hands clasped behind his back, maintaining a careful distance that Catherine found both respectful and somehow sad. "How are you feeling?" he asked quietly. "Everyone keeps asking me that." Catherine pulled the blankets higher, suddenly aware of how vulnerable she was in the borrowed nightgown. "I'm alive. That's more than I expected 3 days ago. Catherine, I need to apologize. For the deception. For not revealing myself sooner. For putting you in danger. You saved my life." The words came out sharper than intended. "Baelor would have killed me if you hadn't intervened. So I'm grateful for that. But I still don't understand why you lied. Why you didn't just come to the pack as yourself and investigate properly." Alderaan moved to sit in the chair Meredith had vacated, still maintaining that careful distance. "Because kings don't see the truth. People hide their worst behavior when authority is watching. I needed to see what my pack had become when they thought no one important was looking. And what did you see? Cruelty. Corruption. A system designed to crush anyone who couldn't fight back." His hands clenched on his knees. "I saw you working yourself to death for scraps. I saw your kindness treated as weakness. And I saw that I had failed you. Failed all the Omegas in this pack. By trusting the wrong people." Catherine studied his face, seeing genuine regret in the lines around his eyes. "What happens now? To me? To Owen? That's your choice." Alderaan leaned forward, meeting her gaze directly. "You're free, Catherine. Truly free. All debts Baelor claimed you owed are void. You and Owen can leave if you wish. I'll provide silver enough to start a new life wherever you choose. Or you can stay here, in the castle, while you decide what you want." "Why would you do that?" Suspicion crept into her voice, years of abuse teaching her that nothing came without a price. "What do you get out of it?" "Nothing. This isn't a negotiation or a manipulation. It's an apology." Alderaan's voice was steady, sincere. "You suffered because I didn't protect you. This is the least I can do to make that right." Catherine wanted to believe him. Wanted to see the gentle beggar who had accepted half a loaf of bread and made her laugh in a stable. But trust, once broken, was difficult to rebuild. "I need time," she said finally. "Time to think. To understand what all this means. The bloodline, the bond, everything. Take all the time you need." Alderaan stood, preparing to leave. "Meredith will help you with whatever you require. Your brother is in the adjoining chamber, by the way. He's been worried sick about you." "Owen is here?" Catherine sat up straighter. "Is he? He's fine. Better than fine, actually. The castle steward has been keeping him occupied with books from the library. I think your brother has read more in 3 days than most scholars manage in a month." Despite everything, Catherine felt a smile tug at her lips. That sounded exactly like Owen. Alderaan moved toward the door, then paused. "Catherine, the conversations we had in the stable, the stories I told you, the way I felt when you laughed, none of that was part of the disguise. That was real." He left before she could respond, the door closing softly behind him. Catherine sat in the quiet room, her mind spinning. After a moment, she called out, "Owen?" The door to the adjoining chamber burst open, and her brother rushed in. At 16, Owen was tall and gangly, all long limbs and earnest eyes. He threw his arms around Catherine, careful of her injuries, and buried his face against her shoulder. "I thought I'd lost you," he whispered. "When the guards came and said Baelor had taken you, I thought, I'm here. I'm safe. Catherine held him tight, breathing in the familiar scent of her little brother. "We're both safe." They stayed like that for a long time. Two orphans who had survived impossible odds, anchored to each other in a world that had tried its best to destroy them. A week passed in strange comfort. Catherine remained in the royal chambers, accepting medical treatment that healed her wounds and restored color to her pale cheeks. She ate 3 meals a day, real meals, with meat and vegetables and fresh bread, and felt strength returning to muscles that had been weakened by years of malnutrition. Owen was deliriously happy. He had been given access to the castle library and spent hours poring over books about pack history, shifter lore, and ancient bloodlines. At night, he would come to Catherine's chambers and read aloud to her, sharing discoveries with infectious enthusiasm. And every day, Alderaan visited. He never stayed long, never pushed for more than Catherine was willing to give. Sometimes they talked about neutral topics, the weather, the castle renovations, news from other packs. Other times they sat in comfortable silence, Alderaan in his chair by the window while Catherine embroidered or read. Slowly, Catherine began to recognize the man beneath the crown. He had the same dry humor as Thomas the Beggar, the same patient listening, the same careful respect for boundaries. When she laughed at one of his stories, his eyes lit up with the same quiet joy she remembered from the stable. "Tell me about your father," Catherine asked one afternoon, setting aside her embroidery. Alderaan's expression darkened. He was a hard man, ruled through fear rather than respect. "When he died, I inherited a pack that had learned to survive by stepping on anyone weaker. Is that why you didn't notice what Baelor was doing?" "Partially." Alderaan's jaw tightened. "I was so focused on undoing my father's damage that I trusted his old counselors to help me. I thought their experience would be valuable. Instead, they used my distraction to build their own power base. And now I'm rebuilding again. But this time, I'm choosing my own advisors. People I trust rather than people I inherited." He met her gaze. "Meredith has agreed to serve as head counselor. She's been suggesting other changes, too. Creating protections for Omegas, reforming the tax system, establishing oversight for pack finances." Catherine felt something warm bloom in her chest. "Those are good changes. They're changes that should have been made years ago." Alderaan leaned back in his chair, but better late than never. In the second week, Meredith began training Catherine to control her shift. They started in a private courtyard, away from curious eyes. Meredith guided Catherine through the transformation slowly, teaching her to recognize the sensations that preceded the change, to accept her wolf rather than fight it. "Your wolf isn't separate from you," Meredith explained. "It's part of who you are. The shift should feel natural, not forced." It took days of practice, but gradually, Catherine learned. And when her wolf finally emerged fully, controlled and conscious, both she and Meredith gasped. Catherine's wolf was magnificent, larger than a normal Omega, with fur that shimmered silver gold in the sunlight. Her eyes remained the same green as her human form, intelligent and aware. She moved with a grace that felt both foreign and perfectly right. "Beautiful," Meredith breathed. The mark of true royal blood. Word spread quickly through the pack. The lost Silvermane had been found. The Alpha King's potential mate was not some common washerwoman, but a royal Omega, whose bloodline was older than the castle itself. Respect came slowly, but it came. Wolves who had ignored Catherine now nodded when she passed. Servants addressed her with courtesy rather than contempt. The pack was beginning to see her as she truly was, but not everyone was pleased. On the 14th night of Catherine's stay in the castle, she woke to the sound of her door being forced open. 3 wolves burst into her chamber, their eyes wild with fanatic devotion. Catherine recognized one of them, a guard who had served under Baelor's command. "For our true beta," the guard snarled, shifting mid-leap. Catherine rolled from the bed, her training with Meredith kicking in automatically. She shifted as she moved, her silver gold wolf emerging with fluid grace. The attackers had expected an easy target. They found a royal Omega who had finally learned to fight. Catherine's jaws closed on the first attacker's leg, her weight and momentum sending him crashing into the wall. The second came at her from the side, but she twisted, raking claws across his muzzle hard enough to draw blood. The third was larger, more experienced. He pinned her against the bed, teeth snapping toward her throat. Then the door exploded inward. Alderon's massive black wolf crashed into the room with terrifying speed. The bond between them had warned him of Catherine's danger, pulling him from sleep with urgent clarity. He grabbed the wolf attacking Catherine and threw him across the room with casual strength. The other two attackers tried to flee, but Alderon was faster. Within seconds, all three lay subdued, whimpering in submission. Guards poured into the chamber, alerted by the commotion. They dragged the attackers away while Alderon shifted back to human form, his eyes blazing with protective fury. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, moving to Catherine's side. She had shifted back as well, breathing hard, adrenaline still coursing through her veins. Blood trickled from a shallow cut on her shoulder, but otherwise she was unharmed. "I'm fine. I fought them." Wonder filled her voice. "I actually fought them." "You did more than fight. You held your own against 3 trained wolves." Alderon reached out hesitantly, his fingers brushing the cut on her shoulder. "But you're bleeding." "Let me—" Catherine grabbed his hand before he could pull away. The bond between them flared at the contact, warm and insistent. She had been so afraid of it, so certain it was another form of control. But in this moment, with fear and triumph and gratitude swirling through her, it felt like connection rather than cage. "Thank you," she whispered. "For coming. For saving me again. Always." The word was a vow. "I'll always come when you need me." They stood there in the chaos of her destroyed chamber, hands clasped, the mate bond pulsing between them with possibilities neither had fully acknowledged yet. And Catherine, who had spent years believing she would never trust anyone again, felt something shift inside her chest. Not complete trust. Not yet. But the beginning of it, fragile and precious. She stepped forward, closing the distance between them. Alderon went very still, hardly daring to breathe. Catherine rose on her toes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was brief, chaste, nothing like the passionate claiming described in old stories. But it was real, and it was her choice, and it was everything. When she pulled back, Alderon's eyes were wide with wonder. "What was that for?" he asked softly. "For being someone worth trusting," Catherine replied, even when I was afraid to believe it. Chapter 7. Blood and Moonlight. The kiss. Catherine had given Alderon changed everything and nothing at all. She woke the morning after the attack to find guards posted outside her chambers. Loyal wolves handpicked by Alderon himself, not the corrupt remnants of Baelor's network. Meredith arrived with breakfast and clean bandages for the shallow cut on her shoulder. "How are you feeling?" the old healer asked, her practiced hands checking the wound with efficient gentleness. "Sore." Confused. Catherine winced as Meredith applied a salve that smelled of pine and something sharper. "I kissed the Alpha King last night." "I heard." Meredith's eyes twinkled with amusement. "The entire castle heard, actually. Guards talk, and when the Alpha King stands in a ruined chamber looking like someone just handed him the moon, people notice." Heat flooded Catherine's cheeks. "I don't know why I did it. He saved me. And I was grateful. And the bond was pulling at me. And you did it because you wanted to." Meredith interrupted gently. "Stop looking for complicated reasons when the simple one is right in front of you." But nothing felt simple about wanting Alderon Greystone. The mate bond had grown stronger since that kiss, thrumming between them like a living thing. Catherine could feel him even now, somewhere in the castle below, his presence a warm certainty at the edge of her awareness. When he felt worry, she felt it too. When his mood darkened, shadows touched her own thoughts. It should have been invasive. Instead, it felt oddly comforting, as though she were no longer entirely alone in the world. "Meredith," Catherine said quietly as the healer finished bandaging her shoulder. "What happens if I accept the bond? Truly accept it? Not just a kiss in a moment of fear and gratitude?" Meredith settled into the chair beside the bed, her weathered face thoughtful. "Tonight is the full moon. If you both choose to complete the bond under moonlight, it will become permanent. You'll be able to sense each other's emotions, Share strength when one of you is weak. And your wolves will recognize each other as mates on the deepest level. And if I don't, then the bond will remain half-formed, a possibility rather than a certainty. You could still walk away, though it would hurt you both. Meredith's gaze was steady. But Catherine, let me be clear. This choice must be yours. Not because Alderaan is king. Not because you're grateful he saved you. Not because the pack expects it. Only if you truly want him. Catherine looked down at her hands. The calluses were fading, her skin healing under good food and rest. But the memory of hunger, of desperation, of grinding poverty lived in every line of her palms. I'm afraid, she admitted, of losing myself, of becoming just an extension of his power. Then tell him that, Meredith said simply. If he's worth claiming as a mate, he'll understand. Alderaan came to her chambers at midday, after Catherine had dressed and eaten, and spent an hour staring out the window trying to sort through her tangled feelings. He knocked rather than entering, waiting for her permission. That small courtesy steadied something inside her. Come in, she called. He entered cautiously, as though approaching a skittish horse. The Alpha King who had torn through 3 attackers with brutal efficiency was nowhere in evidence. This man looked tired, worried, almost uncertain. How's your shoulder? He asked. Healing. Meredith says I'll barely have a scar. Catherine gestured to the chair across from her. Sit, please. Alderaan sat, his large frame somehow making the ornate chair look fragile. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. About last night, they both started, then stopped. Catherine huffed a startled laugh. You first. I don't want you to feel pressured, Alderaan said carefully. The kiss, the bond, any of it. You were frightened and hurt, and I don't want you to think that I expect. I kissed you because I wanted to, Catherine interrupted. Not because I was scared. Not because you're the Alpha King. Because you came when I needed you. And you didn't hesitate. And when I looked at you, I saw both Thomas the Beggar and Alderaan the King. And I wanted both of them. His breath caught. Catherine, but I'm still afraid, she continued, forcing herself to be honest. You have all the power here. You're the king. You're stronger. You have centuries of tradition backing every decision you make. If I accept this bond, if I become your mate, what happens to me? Do I disappear into your shadow? Alderaan leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I can't promise I'll never fail you. I've already failed you once by not seeing Baylor's corruption sooner, but I can promise that I will never use my power to diminish yours. You're a Silvermane, Catherine. Your bloodline is as royal as mine. If you accept this bond, you won't be standing in my shadow. You'll be standing beside me with every bit as much authority. Pretty words, Catherine said, but gently. How do I know you mean them? Because tonight, if you choose to complete the bond, I'll do something no Alpha King has done in 3 generations. His blue eyes held hers steadily. I'll give you joint authority over pack law. Any decision I make regarding Omegas, regarding vulnerable wolves, regarding the protection of those who can't protect themselves, you'll have equal say. And if we disagree, your word will override mine. Catherine's mouth fell open. That's... Alderaan, that's political suicide. The old families will revolt. Let them. His voice carried absolute certainty. I've spent 8 years trying to fix my father's damage while working within systems he built. Those systems are rotten. I need someone who knows what it's like to suffer under them. Someone who'll fight for changes I'm too blind to see. I need you, Catherine. Not as decoration. Not as a trophy. As an equal. She searched his face for any hint of deception, and found only raw honesty. The full moon rises tonight, she said quietly. It does. And if I say yes, if I accept this bond fully, there's no going back. No. Alderaan's expression was solemn. We'll be bound for life, through joy and hardship, through agreements and arguments, through everything the years bring. It's not a decision to make lightly. Catherine stood, moving to the window. Below, she could see Owen in the courtyard, sitting on a bench with a book. A guard stood nearby, but not hovering, protecting rather than imprisoning. Her brother looked happier than she'd seen him in years. "If I do this," she said without turning around, "Owen comes first, always. Before you, before the pack, before everything. I wouldn't want it any other way." Alderon's voice came from just behind her, close but not touching. "He's your family. He'll be mine too if you accept me. You'll create protections for wolves born without their shift. Real protections, not just pretty laws that no one enforces. Done. And you'll listen when I tell you you're wrong, even in front of the pack, even when it embarrasses you. I'll listen." A hint of humor crept into his voice. "I might argue, I might be stubborn, but I'll listen." Catherine turned to face him. They stood close enough that she could see the flecks of darker blue in his eyes, could feel the warmth radiating from his skin. "Then ask me properly," she said. "Not as a king making a political alliance, as a man who wants a mate." Alderon's throat worked as he swallowed. Then, deliberately, he sank to one knee before her. "Catherine," he said, voice rough with emotion, "will you accept me as your mate? Will you stand beside me, argue with me, challenge me, and build something better than either of us could create alone? Will you let me protect you when you need it, and trust me to step back when you don't? Will you take this broken king and help him become the leader his people deserve?" Tears pricked Catherine's eyes. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes to all of it." He rose, and she stepped into his arms, feeling them close around her with fierce gentleness. The bond between them sang, joyful and bright. "Tonight," Alderon murmured against her hair, "under the full moon, we'll complete the bond." "Tonight," Catherine agreed. The ritual would take place in the castle's highest tower, where moonlight could touch them directly. Meredith prepared Catherine personally, braiding her hair with silver thread and dressing her in a simple white gown that left her shoulders bare. Traditional marking required skin-to-skin contact, and the old customs were specific about placement and timing. "Nervous?" Meredith asked as she worked. "Terrified," Catherine admitted. "What if I'm making a mistake? What if the bond changes me into someone I don't recognize? The bond doesn't change who you are. It just reveals more of it." Meredith's hands were steady as she wove the final braid. "You'll still be Catherine. Stubborn, brave, fiercely protective of those you love. But you'll also be Luna Queen, with all the power and responsibility that brings. The question isn't whether you'll change. It's whether you're ready for what you'll become. And if I'm not, then you'll become ready. Growth happens whether we feel prepared for it or not." As the sun set and the moon began its rise, Meredith led Catherine up the winding tower stairs. Alderon waited at the top, dressed in dark blue robes that matched his eyes. Torches burned in sconces along the walls, but the real light came from above, where the full moon hung massive and silver in a cloudless sky. The tower top was open to the air, a circular platform surrounded by a low stone wall. Runes had been carved into the floor, ancient symbols that predated the current pack lines. This was old magic, the kind that connected wolves to the moon goddess herself. "Stand here," Meredith instructed, indicating the center of the carved circle. Catherine and Alderon moved to face each other. The old healer walked around them 3 times, murmuring words in a language Catherine didn't recognize. Then she stepped back, leaving them alone in the moonlight. "You both understand what this means," Meredith said formally. "Once the bond is sealed, it cannot be broken except by death. You will feel what the other feels. Your wolves will recognize each other before all others. Your powers will strengthen each other, but your weaknesses will be shared as well." "I understand," Alderon said. "I understand," Catherine echoed. "Then when you're ready, make your claim." Silence fell, broken only by the wind whistling around the tower. Catherine's heart pounded so hard she thought it might break free of her chest. Alderon reached out slowly, giving her every chance to refuse. His fingers found the collar of her gown, gently pulling it aside to expose her shoulder and the curve of her neck. "May I?" he asked quietly. Catherine tilted her head, offering access. "Yes." His lips brushed her skin first, a gentle touch that sent shivers down her spine. Then his teeth, human still, not shifted, pressed down in a claiming bite that was more symbolic than painful. The moment his teeth broke skin, power exploded between them. Catherine gasped as the bond flooded her senses. She could feel Alderon's wolf rising, could sense his fierce joy and protective instinct, and the deep, aching love he'd been holding back for weeks. Their consciousnesses brushed against each other, not merging but connecting. Two separate beings learning the rhythm of each other's existence. Then, before Catherine could process the overwhelming sensation, something else stirred. Her wolf surged forward with a power she'd never felt before. The royal bloodline that had been suppressed for so long awakened fully, responding to the mate bond like tinder catching flame. She shifted involuntarily, her human form dissolving into her silver-gold wolf. But this wasn't the clumsy, painful transformation she'd experienced before. This was smooth, natural, as though her wolf had always been waiting just beneath the surface. Alderon shifted as well, his massive black wolf facing her in the moonlight. Their eyes met, his blue fire, hers green flame, and something ancient and powerful settled into place. The mate bond completed. Catherine felt it like a door slamming shut and opening simultaneously. She could sense Alderon's presence not just near her, but inside her, a second heartbeat that matched her own. His strength flowed into her, and hers into him, until she couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. She threw her head back and howled, the sound carrying across the castle and into the territories beyond. Alderon joined her, his deeper voice twining with hers in a song of claim and acceptance. Every wolf who heard it would know. Their alpha king had found his mate. They shifted back to human form together, standing breathless and overwhelmed in the moonlight. Blood trickled from the bite mark on Catherine's neck, already beginning to heal with a silvery scar that would mark her as claimed for life. "Your turn," Alderon said hoarsely, tilting his head to bare his own neck. Catherine reached up, her hand trembling. She'd never bitten anyone before, never marked another wolf as hers. But instinct guided her, the bond showing her where to place her teeth for maximum impact. She bit down, tasting his blood, copper and heat, and something uniquely Alderon. Power surged again as the claiming became mutual, two wolves bound together by choice and moonlight and magic older than memory. When she pulled back, Alderon was staring at her with wonder written clearly across his face. "How do you feel?" he whispered. Catherine considered. The bond hummed between them, strong and steady. She could feel his emotions, joy, relief, love, as clearly as her own. Her wolf was calm for the first time in years, content with the mate they'd chosen. "Whole," she said finally. "Like I've been walking around with half my soul missing and I just found it." He pulled her close, and she went willingly, resting her head against his chest while his heartbeat thundered in her ear. Below them, the pack began to gather in the courtyard. Word had spread quickly. Wolves shifted and howled in celebration, acknowledging their new Luna queen. Meredith appeared at the top of the stairs, smiling broadly. "Come. They want to see you together." Hand in hand, Catherine and Alderon descended the tower. The bond had been completed. The claims had been made. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them as mates, as partners, as equals. And tomorrow, the real work would begin. Chapter 8. A Kingdom. Reborn. 6 months had passed since Catherine accepted the mate bond under the full moon. Spring arrived early in Valdoria, bringing with it warmth that thawed snow from the castle ramparts and coaxed wildflowers from the meadows beyond the walls. But the real transformation wasn't in the weather. It was in the pack itself. Catherine stood at the window of the chambers she now shared with Alderon, watching the morning activity in the courtyard below. A group of young Omegas practiced shifting under Meredith's watchful supervision, their movements growing more confident with each transformation. Near the stables, Owen sat at a desk that had been set up specifically for him, his quill moving rapidly across parchment as he documented the new laws being implemented across the territories. "You're up early," Alderon's voice came from behind her, rough with sleep. Catherine turned to find her mate propped up on one elbow in bed, dark hair tousled, blue eyes soft with affection. Even after 6 months, the sight of him like this, unguarded and peaceful, still made her breath catch. "I couldn't sleep," she admitted, moving back to sit on the edge of the bed, Too much to think about. The ceremony tonight? His hand found hers, fingers intertwining naturally. Among other things. Catherine allowed herself a small smile. It's been 6 months, Alderaan. Sometimes I still wake up expecting to be back in that cabin, washing clothes for scraps. But you're not. He sat up, pulling her against his chest. The mate bond hummed contentedly between them, a constant warmth that had become as natural as breathing. You're here. You're Luna Queen. And you've changed more in this pack in 6 months than I managed in 8 years. It was true, though Catherine still struggled to accept the credit. The Omega protection laws had been her first priority. Working with Meredith and a council of reformed elders, she had abolished the debt servitude system entirely. Any Omega who had been forced into unfair contracts was freed immediately, their fabricated debts erased. Guards who had participated in Baylor's schemes faced trial. Some were imprisoned, others exiled. All were removed from positions of power. Baylor Greystone himself remained in the deepest cells beneath the castle, stripped of his title and awaiting a tribunal whose verdict was all but certain. But Catherine hadn't stopped there. She had established sanctuaries for wolves born without their shift, safe places where they could learn trades and contribute to pack life without fear of persecution. Owen had been instrumental in designing the program, using his own experiences to create a system that valued intelligence and skill over raw strength. Faces from those first months still came to her unbidden. From Mira of the Western Quarter, now working in the palace laundry by choice, her child healthy and loud and never far from her arms, to the pregnant Omega who had once been dragged toward the stocks for a debt she had already paid, now living in a small house on the castle grounds, knitting tiny blankets while her mate repaired furniture for the nursery. They were no longer warnings in a crowd or names in a ledger. They were women with futures that belonged to them again. Tax reforms followed, creating a fairer distribution of wealth throughout the territories. The poorest families received support rather than punishment. Orphans were given homes rather than being left to starve. Sick wolves received healing regardless of their ability to pay. Not everyone had been pleased with the changes. 3 noble families had attempted to leave the pack entirely, unwilling to surrender the privileges they'd enjoyed under the old system. Alderaan had let them go without argument, though Catherine knew it had cost him politically. Other families grumbled, but complied, seeing which way the wind was blowing. And slowly, grudgingly, the pack had begun to transform. I'm nervous about tonight, Catherine admitted, resting her head against Alderaan's shoulder. Renewing our vows in front of every pack in the realm. What if they don't accept me? What if they see me as nothing more than a commoner who got lucky? Then they're fools. Alderaan's voice carried absolute certainty. And more importantly, they're wrong. You earned your place, Catherine. Not through luck or bloodline, but through the work you've done and the changes you've fought for. A knock at the door interrupted them. Come in, Alderaan called. Meredith entered, her expression bright despite the early hour. Good morning, my lord, my lady. I hope I'm not interrupting. Never, Catherine said warmly. The old healer had become more than an advisor. She was friend, mentor, and the grandmother Catherine had never known. I wanted to review the ceremony schedule before the delegations start arriving. Meredith pulled a scroll from her robes, unrolling it with practiced efficiency. Representatives from 17 packs are confirmed. They'll want to meet you both before the public ceremony. Catherine's stomach twisted with nerves. But she nodded. This ceremony wasn't just about her and Alderaan. It was a statement to every pack in the realm that things had changed, that a new era had begun. We'll be ready, she said. The delegations began arriving at midday. Catherine stood beside Alderaan in the Great Hall, wearing robes of silver and blue that marked her as Luna Queen. The mate mark on her neck was visible, a silvery scar that caught the light when she moved. She'd stopped hiding it weeks ago, wearing it instead as a badge of pride. The first pack to enter was led by an older alpha named Beggar, who ruled territories to the east. He bowed respectfully to Alderaan, then turned his attention to Catherine with obvious curiosity. Luna Queen, he said carefully. I've heard much about the reforms you've implemented. My own pack has been inspired by your example. Inspired to follow or inspired to resist? Catherine asked bluntly. She'd learned that directness served her better than courtly games. Gregor's lips twitched with amusement. Inspired to follow, actually. My beta has been arguing for Omega protections for years. I didn't listen until I saw what you accomplished here. He paused. I came today to ask if you'd be willing to send advisors to help us implement similar changes. Pride swelled in Catherine's chest, warm and unfamiliar. I'd be honored. The meetings continued throughout the afternoon. Some alphas were genuinely supportive, seeing Catherine's reforms as overdue improvements. Others were more skeptical, their questions carrying barbs about tradition and proper hierarchy. Catherine answered each one with patient firmness, Alderaan a steady presence at her side. By the time evening approached, she was exhausted but cautiously hopeful. You handled them beautifully, Alderaan murmured, as they retreated to their chambers to prepare for the ceremony. Even the ones who came looking for weakness left impressed. I just told them the truth. Catherine allowed servants to help her into the ceremonial gown. White silk embroidered with silver thread, more elaborate than anything she'd ever worn. That protecting the vulnerable makes packs stronger, not weaker. A truth many of them needed to hear. Alderaan was already dressed in his formal robes, dark blue trimmed with silver to match hers. He looked every inch the king, powerful and commanding. But when he looked at Catherine, his expression softened into something gentler. Are you ready? He asked. She thought of the beggar in the stable, the king on his throne, the mate who had given her equal authority without hesitation. She thought of Owen, safe and valued. She thought of the Omegas learning to shift without fear, the families no longer drowning in fabricated debt. Yes, Catherine said. I'm ready. The ceremony took place in the castle's largest courtyard, where hundreds of wolves had gathered. Torches lined the walls, their flames dancing in the evening breeze. Representatives from all 17 visiting packs stood in places of honor, while Valdoria's own citizens filled every available space. Even the walls were crowded with people leaning out of windows to watch. Catherine and Alderaan walked through the crowd together, hand in hand. The mate bond thrummed between them, steady and sure. When they reached the raised platform at the center of the courtyard, Meredith was waiting. We gather tonight. The old healer's voice rang out, amplified somehow so even those at the back could hear. To witness the renewal of vows between our Alpha King and Luna Queen. 6 months ago, they sealed their mate bond under the full moon. Tonight, they reaffirmed that choice before all the packs of the realm. Silence fell. Every eye focused on the couple at the center. Alderaan turned to face Catherine, taking both her hands in his. When he spoke, his voice carried clearly across the courtyard. 6 months ago, I asked you to stand beside me, to challenge me, to help me become the leader this pack deserved. You've done all that and more. You've transformed this kingdom in ways I never imagined possible. You've given voice to those who had none, protection to those who were vulnerable, and hope to those who had forgotten what it felt like. He squeezed her hands gently. But what I treasure most isn't the political reforms or the laws. It's the fact that every morning, I wake up beside someone who sees both the king and the man, and loves them equally. Someone who shares her last loaf of bread with strangers and fights like a warrior when her people are threatened. Someone who makes me want to be better, not because she demands it, but because she deserves a mate who can match her strength. Catherine's eyes stung with tears she refused to let fall. I renew my vows to you, Catherine, Alderaan said formally. Not because the moon demands it, but because I choose you. Today, tomorrow, and every day that follows. It was Catherine's turn. She had prepared a speech, practiced words that she'd memorized carefully. But standing here, feeling the weight of hundreds of gazes and the warmth of her mate's hands, those prepared words fled. Instead, she spoke from her heart. 6 months ago, I was terrified of losing myself in you, of becoming just an extension of your power, invisible in your shadow. She swallowed hard. But you've never asked me to be anything other than exactly who I am. Stubborn, opinionated, fiercely protective of those I love. You've given me power and trusted me to use it wisely. You've listened when I told you that you were wrong, even when it embarrassed you in front of the pack. A ripple of quiet laughter moved through the crowd. Alderaan's smile was soft and genuine. More than that, Catherine continued. You showed me what it means to be seen, truly seen. Not as a failed omega or a political asset, but as a person worth knowing, worth protecting, worth loving. She stepped closer, until they were nearly touching. I renew my vows to you, Alderaan. I choose you as my mate, my partner, my equal. I choose the beggar who accepted half a loaf of bread and the king who fights for his people. I choose all of you, flawed and fierce and impossibly stubborn. Today, tomorrow, and for as long as we both live. Meredith raised her hands, and the gathered wolves fell silent. The moon bears witness, she declared. The bond is renewed, the vows reaffirmed. Let all present acknowledge Catherine and Alderaan as mates, bound by choice and strengthened by love. The courtyard erupted in howls, hundreds of voices raised in celebration. The sound was deafening, joyful, a recognition that rippled out beyond the castle walls and into the territories beyond. Alderaan pulled Catherine into his arms, and she went willingly, burying her face against his chest as the howls continued around them. I love you, he murmured against her hair, quiet enough that only she could hear through the noise. Every stubborn, brilliant, impossibly brave part of you. I love you too, she whispered back, even when you're infuriatingly right about things. He laughed, and the sound vibrated through the mate bond, warm and bright. The celebration continued long into the night, but Catherine and Alderaan eventually slipped away to the castle ramparts, seeking a moment of quiet. They stood side by side, looking out over the territories spread before them. Moonlight painted everything silver, the village below, the forest beyond, the distant mountains marking the pack's boundaries. I have something to tell you, Catherine said softly. Alderaan turned to her, concern flickering across his face. What is it? She placed his hand over her stomach, holding it there. I saw Meredith this morning. She confirmed what I suspected. His eyes widened as understanding dawned. You're pregnant? With twins. Catherine's voice trembled between joy and fear. Meredith says she can sense 2 distinct heartbeats already. For a moment, Alderaan simply stared at her. Then he dropped to his knees, pressing his forehead against her stomach, his shoulders shaking. Alderaan? Catherine's hands found his hair, worried. Are you... I'm happy, he said, his voice thick with emotion. So happy I can barely breathe. Relief flooded through her. I wasn't sure how you'd feel. It's so soon, and there's still so much work to do. It's perfect. He stood, framing her face with his hands. You're perfect. Our children will be so loved, so protected. They'll grow up in a kingdom that values compassion over cruelty, that sees strength in kindness. Tears finally spilled down Catherine's cheeks. They'll grow up with a father who's brave enough to disguise himself as a beggar to find the truth, and a mother who was foolish enough to share her last meal with a stranger. Not foolish, Alderaan corrected gently, wiping her tears with his thumbs. Wise. The wisest decision either of us ever made. They stood together on the ramparts, 2 wolves who had found each other in the darkest circumstances and built something better than either had dreamed possible. Below them, the pack celebrated. Above them, the moon shone bright and full, and in that moment, held safe in her mate's arms with new life growing beneath her heart, Catherine finally understood what it meant to be home. Not a place, not a title, not even a pack. Home was the warmth of Alderaan's embrace, the sound of Owen's laughter echoing from the library below, the knowledge that she had fought for changes that would protect generations to come. Home was choosing and being chosen, loving and being loved, building a future where no one would have to share their last loaf of bread out of desperation. Only kindness. And as the celebrations continued into the night, as representatives from distant packs pledged their support for the reforms, as a new era dawned across Valdoria, Catherine allowed herself to believe in happy endings after all. Not because fairy tales promised them, but because she and Alderaan had fought for theirs, one difficult choice at a time. And that, Catherine thought, as her mate's hand rested protectively over their growing children, made it real. The end.